All right, we are still in Unit 1. We're on Chapter 3. We're looking at some practice problems here. Still, but we're looking at this one. It is more politics. It says, look at another table here. We were doing for our intro to stat stuff. It says, produce a graphical display comparing the conditional distributions of males and females among the three categories of politics. So, we have males and females, right, with different choices there. And it says, among the three categories of politics, and comment briefly on what you see in the displays. So, taking a look at that, here's what we have. With each of these, basically all you're doing is trying to find the totals for each. So, in this column, there's only two choices for male and female. So 35 divided by 85 for the females, and 50 divided by 85 for males, and so on. 36 divided by 80, 44 divided by 80, and then we have this right here, 6 divided by 27, 21 divided by 27 to get your columns. And it says distribution of sex across the political categories, whether they are conservative, liberal, or moderate, basically is what that's standing for. And it seems that most men appear to be more conservative when you just kind of roughly scan this graph. But out of the totals of anyone saying conservative, out of every man polled, though, they aren't the most in that category, being conservative. But if you are conservative, you're more than likely to be a male, is what that is looking like. Moderate is almost right down the middle, and it's almost close to a third of all of the males, and almost closer to half of the females is scanning it. The same with liberal. Let's look at these. But percent of males and females varies across them. The percentage of self-identified liberals and moderates who are female, they're about twice the percentage of the conservatives. This suggests that sex and politics, for the most part, are independent of each other. You can't completely compare. The only thing that I would argue that I could see from this is that it does appear that if you are labeled to be conservative, it is more likely that you are probably male than female. But otherwise, it didn't really show us anything else. In the year 2000, there was a journal, right, and published a study that examined pregnancies that resulted in births of twins. Births were classified as preterm with intervention, preterm without procedures, or postterm. Researchers also classified pregnancies by the level of prenatal medical care that the mother received. Was it adequate, inadequate, intensive? The data from the years 95 to 97 are summarized in the table. All right, so here we go. Preterm, all right, were they induced, basically? Preterm with some kind of procedure that they had to get, or postterm, basically is what we have, and the level of care that they received as well. So scanning through here, it says what percent of these mothers received inadequate medical care? All right, so what percent of mothers, all of them were mothers, inadequate care? All right, so I'm probably going with that. So taking a gander here, these are in thousands, but just in case, if you'd still get the same number either way, and that's 63,000. So I would divide the 63 and the 278 to get roughly 22.7% had inadequate care. All right, and here is the totals from everything again, just a larger picture of how it all works. Part B, it says right here, what percent of all twin births were preterm? So what percent of all twin births? And trying to scan here to see, or preterm. So, taking a gander here, it says there are 76,000 preterm, all right, or cesarean, and 71,000, there are 76,000 induced, or 31,000 that were cesarean. So preterm births with these procedures, right? because it says, let's see here, what is it asking? What percent of all twin births were preterm? They're both preterm. So that's the total, but both of those, they're both preterm is basically what it's getting at. So if you take both of those and add them up and divide by 278, you would get 52%. Scrolling back through here. C, among the mothers who received inadequate medical care, what percent of twin births were pretermed? Well, both of those are preterm, so we would add those up. So I guess it's 25 divided by 63 is what we have to do. So among the mothers who received inadequate care, you have 25 divided by the 63, which is 39.7%. Scrolling back here again. Create an appropriate graph comparing the outcomes of these pregnancies by level of medical care. So by level of medical care is what we're going to make it out of. All right, across the board and write a few sentences. So we're going to make the graph in accordance to medical care in doing these. So of intense, adequate, inadequate, right? We made it. So just kind of taking each one and dividing is all they're doing by level of care. So they're coming up with these. And it looked like that the people who had inadequate care, there was more inadequate care for people with post terms. But it says here after you make your graph by adequate care, when you're scanning this down, just to see, to compare. For the most part, things tend to look the same except for this one. There seems to be more inadequate care for the term or post-term people in general. But for the most part, whether it's intensive or predetermined, they seem to be getting the right quality care there. With this one, a company held a blood pressure screening clinic for its employees, and the results are summarized. So for their employees, and then their level of, that is, let's find the marginal distribution of blood pressure level. All right, so marginal distribution of blood pressure level. We got to do all that work on the side. So the marginal distribution of blood pressure for the employees of the company is the total column of the table converted to percentages. So the total column, and taking a look at this to see if we what we get when we divide them. We are looking at 95 divided by 474 to get that is the low, because they want the blood pressure for each. So that's why I'm going across. 232 divided by 474 and 147 divided by 474. And there you are. The conditional distribution of blood pressure within each age category is, so the conditional distribution of blood pressure with each age category, right? So now they're looking at it in terms of age. To get to that 28% for low for each age, you're just going to take them and divide them down is basically how you're going to get it. 27 divided by 98 is roughly the 28%. 48 divided by 98 is roughly the 49%. 23 divided by 98 is roughly the 23%. And so on for this category. Divide each of those for the 50. Divide each of those, and that's where they're coming from. And then they wanted a bar graph for each of these different categories, and that's why we took the time to already set up the percentages, so it would make it easier to see that each of these are, the normal are all around the 50% mark. The high are also pretty close. It seems overall the blood pressure for more people who are high, and then there are more people who aren't as low. With low blood pressure, I said they are low in that under 30 range. So you have those, and it says in part D, what was it asking us for? Write a brief description, and does this prove that people's blood pressure increases with age is basically what we're looking at. So looking at the data and looking at that, it says in these companies, as age increases, so as their age goes up, the percentage with low blood pressure does appear to go down, and the percentage of higher blood pressure does seem to increase a little bit. This isn't proving that people's blood pressure increases at age. It's just a general thing that you are seeing with it. Like that's why they're calling it like an association, I guess, between the two more than anything. You're seeing some kind of association with the variables. It does not imply that there's a relationship. There could be. So you'd want to look into it, is the point. It's data that when you look at this, you'd say, well, it kind of looks like that. So you might want to look for more proof. So there may be some other variable that is linking them together. We're not sure. But only a controlled experiment where we can isolate some of those procedures might be helpful. Okay. With hearing reports that some patients undergoing treatments for eating disorders, anorexia, seem to be responding positively to antidepressant like Prozac. Medical researchers conducted an experiment to investigate, and they found 93 women being treated for anorexia who volunteered to participate. For 1 year, 49 randomly selected patients were treated with Prozac, and the other 44 were given an inert substance called a placebo, and at the end of the year, patients were diagnosed as healthy or relapsed. All right, so taking a look. So you have patients, 93 total. 49 took Prozac, 44 didn't. And out of those 49 that took Prozac, here is who is healthy and who relapsed. Out of the 44 who had a placebo, here's who are healthy and who relapsed, basically is what we're saying. And do these results prove evidence that Prozac might be helpful? Okay, so we're looking at it to see. The data provides no evidence, all right, that Prozac might be helpful in the treatment. About 71% of the patients who took Prozac, all right, were healthy. So it basically just divided those together, right? While about 73% of the patients who took the placebo had the same effect. They both were. Even though the percentage was higher for the placebo patients, this does not mean that Prozac is hurting them. It just means they're kind of similar. So I'm not noticing really whether that's going to help or not by you simply taking Prozac or not taking Prozac. It still is about the same either way, is what we're seeing with it. Okay. And then I will come back with some more examples of basically looking at some tables and graphs and interpreting our data.